I guess you get the end. You're back to the... Yes, it's a little, yes, Karen's.
That's why I come so early, because I don't want to give up.
We're almost at full capacity.
We're going to wait just a minute while he replaces the battery in the microphone.
Oh, good, you brought back the binders. I was going to put a message out to everyone that we won't have a March meeting unless you bring back your binders.
You might not get them back.
Is it as easy as that? Okay.
You love meetings.
I do.
Hello?
Hello?
Is this coming through?
Mm-mm.
There we go.
There you go.
Has to warm up.
Let's hope not. Some of those connections you couldn't
Okay.
cut the wire on the connector.
We ready to roll? Recording? All right. I'm going to call the meeting to order. City Council of Monday, February 8th, 2021. Good evening, everyone. Just a couple of housekeeping items. Just want to make sure that everyone who has a phone turns the volume down ahead of time so we don't have any interruptions during the meeting. And then also just a note on masks, just to make sure everyone is wearing a mask and keeps it that way. That would be fantastic. We're at the top of my comfort limit for an in-person meeting here. So with that said, if we could do a roll call, please.
Dave Anderson? Here. Carl Broberg? Here. Jennifer Mazias?
Here.
Mary McGrath?
Here.
Tom Nymus?
Here.
Karen Spears Novacek?
Here.
Laura Tulowitzki?
Here.
All present.
Okay, and one final note, just please remember with the people online, if we can all try to speak as loudly and clearly as possible into a microphone. If you have one near you, Dave, you're going to have to just yell. You have a pretty good loud voice. And just keep that in mind, please, throughout. Okay, next we'll do the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
After the Super Bowl, I feel like we should do something with more flourish of music or something. Okay, next item, approval of minutes from City Council meeting of January 11th of 2021.
Madam Mayor, I would move approval of the City Council minutes of January 11, 2021.
I'll second that.
Motion by Karen, second by Tom. Are there any corrections, additions, edits? I have a couple typos I'll turn into you, Tony.
Okay.
All right, seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next item, approval of monthly expenditures via roll call vote.
Madam Mayor, I would move approval of the monthly expenditures as reviewed.
Second.
I heard Laura on that. So a motion by Karen and a second by Laura. Roll call vote, please.
Laura Tulowitzki,
Yes.
Karen Novacek,
Yes.
Tom Nymus,
Yes.
Mayor McGrath,
Yes.
Jen Mazias,
Yes.
Carl Broberg,
Yes.
Dave Anderson,
Yes.
Motion carries. Thank you all for your work on that. Next item on the agenda is public comment. Is there someone here tonight who would like to address the council? Vince? Go ahead and step up, and I think we need you to state your name and address. Anything else that I'm missing?
if you could sign in.
Good evening, council members and people of Washburn. I guess except for the mayor, you folks don't know who I am. My name is Vince Curda, and I'm running for Bayfield County Circuit Court Judge, April 6th. I'm currently an assistant district attorney for Sawyer County. Before that, I worked for the Bad River Tribe as one of their legal office. And before that, I was in private practice working with Office Law Office. I'm the father of 3 kids, and I have a lovely wife, Carolina, who is a respiratory therapist at the hospital. She's dealing with a lot of sick people these days. So I'm very grateful for the work that she's doing. I had a trial scheduled, so I wasn't able to get on the agenda. I thought I wouldn't be able to make it here, so that's why I'm here at the public comment section. Hopefully the next meeting I'll get on the agenda. Maybe I can get into a little bit more about who I am and why I'm running for judge. But I guess the summary is that I was asked to run, and it took me a long time to think about it, and then I pulled the plug in December. So here I am, going full force. So I think at the next meeting I'll get into a little bit more. I don't want to take up too much of your time, but I would definitely appreciate the support of the people of Washburn and more across Bayfield County, come April 6th. I thank you for your time, and hopefully I'll see you again next month.
Thanks, Vince. Is there anyone online who has any public comment?
Yeah, I have a public comment.
Sure, go ahead. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is John French.
And your
My
address?
address is 17990 West Wheeler Lake, Lakewood, Wisconsin.
Did you catch that? It's being recorded, so we can go back. Okay, go ahead, John.
I would just like to, basically say it sounds like you guys are going to be voting on this ordinance to restrict commercial business or to regulate commercial business. And I'll kind of use some of the wording you guys have used before. You identified that you needed to amend this ordinance because of a problem that has arisen in your city. And that problem, you pointed out, was at a beach. So obviously you were referencing the fact that your beach was being utilized for commercial purposes. No one ever spread any COVID there. And you identified that as a problem, but not the super spreader event that occurred in Washburn this year at the event center. That event center has several permits that you guys could have pulled. You did not do anything at all. You took absolutely no action against their gross violation of the CDC regulations. And then you've got another guy who took advantage and was prosecuted by the state for soliciting insurance and abusing the elderly, and he's still operating in your city. So abuse to the elderly and a COVID super spreader event do not count to you guys as a issue, but apparently kayaks launching from a beach that never spread any COVID are an issue to you. And I can tell you that if you do pass this ordinance the way it's written in your event speaking similar to another ordinance that was ruled unconstitutional in Door County, and I will be seeking to have a judge put an injunction on your ordinance.
Okay, is that it?
That's all.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other public comment? Seeing none, we will move on. The next item is mayoral announcements, proclamations, and appointments. The first thing I'd like to just remind everyone of is for voting this month, there is still time to request an absentee ballot. I believe Thursday is the last day that you can do that. But if you do request an absentee ballot, you probably should plan on dropping it off at the drop box to make sure that it gets turned in time to be counted. In-person early voting, the last day to do that is Friday. And then it moves to election day voting in person. Just a reminder that those are the transitions coming up for our primary election, February 16th. The next thing I wanted to mention is it was about a year ago that we had a meeting, and it was a meeting that had members of the Washburn Area Chamber of Commerce, members of the Washburn Business Alliance, and members of our city council and the mayor at the time, Richard Avall. We all met with Kelly Peterson from the UW Division of Extension, who talked to us about the possibility of doing a community branding initiative. This is something that I'm really excited about, the opportunity to do this, and I know that our staff are already at full bore, so this is a project of the mayor's office now. At the time, everybody who was at that meeting was, I think, very excited about the prospect of moving forward with this process of a community branding initiative. And what that means is the staff from UW-Madison Division of Extension will lead a group of residents that we're working on recruiting to be on this. It's a relatively small committee, 6 to 8 people, of people who live in Washburn or in an immediately adjoining town, but preferably living in the city of Washburn, with differing perspectives at different, stages in life, at different, part of the school or part of the community somehow. And the goal of this is to decide who we are. Washburn, for the longest time, has not really had a unified identity that we can all stand behind and communicate out to the public. And I think that that's something that is really critical for us to be able to get behind and move forward with. And it'll be a way that we can decide who we are and then tell it to the world. I have a document here that is a draft plan. And the plan is for the meetings of this committee to begin the first week of March. There will be a survey that will go out to every resident with the next utility bill, by the way, as a way to get that out to the public, to everybody in the city, as well as it'll be online as well. And it talks about what is a community brand, why, why should we do this? How do we discover our brand, and what the process is. So I'll be sharing this with council and anyone else who has an interest in the process. This is all at the expense of the Division of Extension for the staff time to go through this and their expertise. There's also a component where they do a downtown market analysis. They have a couple grad students who are already doing some of the research that will be the foundation of this. So I'm really excited about it. I'm happy to talk with anyone who has questions about it. And I'm sure Kelly would be happy to come to a council meeting also if that would be of interest, to talk about it a little bit more. So that's all I have on that for now. I also wanted to mention that I had my first board of directors meeting for the League of Wisconsin Municipalities the other day. And I am representing one of 3 communities of less than 5,000 population. And the board is, I don't know the total number, but there's like 16, 18 members of this board. And so it's really important that we have small communities like Washburn represented on that board that can help communicate the issues from our perspective on the issues that they're dealing with lobbying the legislature on. So, so that was good. It was longer than I anticipated, but it was good. And then also just a reminder that there is a special plan commission meeting this Thursday, the 11th, that is going to be the kickoff of the comprehensive plan update process. And the 3 questions that if anybody wants to give input to the plan commission ahead of time on are going to be what's great about Washburn, what's missing from Washburn, and what issues do you see? So it's really timely that this is happening at the same time that the branding initiative is happening. You know, there's so much planning happening all at the same time that it's challenging to juggle, but at the same time, it's very timely that it's all happening in conjunction, and hopefully we will all those processes will come out with a really solid result because of that. That is all I have for announcements. I don't have any proclamations this month, and there is one appointment that I would like to have you consider. And that is an reappointment really, of Rick Grubely to the Harbor Commission.
Madam Mayor, I would move approval of reappointing Rick Grubely to the Harbor Commission.
I'll second that.
Motion by Karen, second by Tom. Any discussion on that? Questions, comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Rick. Appreciate you coming back on board. Next item on our agenda is a presentation by the Bayfield County Circuit Court Judge John Anderson.
Well, good evening, everyone. Madam Mayor, council members, for those of you in virtual land, City of Washburn, hello, or my neighbors and friends. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Judge Anderson. Most of you know me by John, because that's what you normally call me. Well, I shouldn't say that. It's probably half and half now. I kind of lost my name. You know, when I first took the bench, I asked Judge Gallagher, I said, what's going to be the biggest change? He said, you got about 6 months left of being called John. Called Judge for the rest of your life. That's okay. So, you know, obviously, you already know there's a contested race here in Bayfield County. My term, my last 6-year term is up, and there'll be an election in April. I've been your judge for the last 18 years. I practiced law in Washburn for 14 years before that. I was the proud member of Karen Novacek's father's firm, Bob Spears. He was a great mentor of mine. I sat in these council chambers as your city attorney, right over that. My seat was right where Tom's is right now, where the city attorney was there every day for the meetings. You know, so my involvement here is long. It's in depth. Obviously, most of you know my family's been around the city of Washburn for over 100 years, and we're very proud of what we've been able to bring. That little bit of help that we can bring to the city. That's been part of our family heritage. So, but I'm not here tonight to talk about my family heritage. I'm here to talk a little bit about the campaign that's coming up. Mr. Curtis is here. He's going to come back and tell you a little bit about himself. I think I have worked very, very hard as your judge in the last 18 years. I doubt anybody could put more effort into the job than I have. You know, if you're familiar with the courthouse, my truck is the first one there in the morning. It's usually the last one to leave at night. I mean, I put a lot of hours in and I work very hard at it. And you know, that work hasn't gone completely unnoticed. I mean, I don't just stand here today as the Bayfield County judge. I'm the deputy chief of the entire district. That's 14 counties throughout northwestern Wisconsin, from Hudson to Hurley. There's a chief judge and a deputy chief judge. So that's 14 counties, 26, 27 judges. I'm the deputy chief. You get that, you know, by becoming competent and respected in your position. I've always tried to run a fair and impartial courtroom. I listen, I'm patient with everyone. Dan Clark's here tonight. He sat in my courtroom more than he wants to admit, I would venture to guess. And you know, judges, we apply the law to the facts as we see them. We try and be open-minded, and we call them as we see them. Once you apply the law to the facts, and the facts of every case are different, and that's what we do. But there's more to being a judge in a single judge county, you know, than just ruling from the bench. There's an enormous amount of administrative work that you have to be good at. And I have developed an extremely strong reputation for being a good judicial administrator over the years. I've made sure that Bayfield County's court is a model of a single judge efficiency. We're recognized throughout the state as running a very, very good court system. And I'll talk a little bit about that as to why I think that's there. And one of the reasons is that case processing and being efficient in what you're doing, because you can't just say every case gets an unlimited amount of time, because it simply doesn't work that way. Just as you have to allocate time for certain issues, I have to allocate time. So being a good case manager is important as a circuit court judge. You know, the other aspect about it is that over the years, when I first took the bench, you know, judges were kind of behind the scenes. We weren't really encouraged to get involved in a lot of things, and now you know, I run a treatment court, and I sit on the Criminal Justice Council, and I do an awful lot of stuff that tries to make better outcomes that occur in our criminal and juvenile justice system. That's the role of the 21st century judge. There's absolutely no question. That role has changed. It's not the way it used to be. It's much different today. And in Bayfield County, we've developed methods and collaboration with treatment courts, evidence-based practices in the jail, programs in the jail that are designed to reduce recidivism. What does that mean? We don't want people to reoffend. And over the years, using evidence-based practices, you know, we have a recidivism rate in Bayfield County which is substantially lower than the state average. Why? Because we look at what works and we treat the people. I learned a long time ago, when I first took the bench, that when people are going to go to jail, all the evidence showed us was that if you take a person and you put them in jail, the statistics will tell you that they're more likely to recidivate just by putting them in jail. In other words, they come out worse than when you put them in. Now, that doesn't seem logical, but that's what the statistics and the evidence suggest. So the first thing you realize is, you know, when they're in there, we have to do something with them so that we can reduce that risk to the community. And that's what we've done in Bayfield County. We have strong jail programs. That wouldn't have happened if I didn't push for it many, many years ago. Now, and Dan Clark knows all too well that it didn't happen overnight. And it took a while to get everybody on board. You know, these last several years, now we have a very, very strong, collaborative, working relationship with the jail, the Sheriff's Department, law enforcement, and we reach good, solid policy decisions. And, you know, that's just not magic. That took a lot of hard work. And one of the things that has been very, very, very enlightening to me and I'm very proud of is that we've been able to work together as a team. And to do that, you build relationships. You have to learn how to work together, respect people's decisions. So a lot of the things that I do, on the bench, but you do it in an administrative capacity too. Now, it's funny, I'm not used to talking with that stuff. When I was a lawyer, I talked a lot more. When I'm a judge, I actually don't talk that much. And I want to finish up talking about some of that at the end with with an announcement that I want to make here. It hasn't been made anywhere else yet, and I'm very proud of it. But obviously, I think I have deserved to be reelected. I've worked extremely hard. I admire Vince. He's a good man. I welcome him to a race. I think the people of Bayfield County deserve a choice, and you're going to have a choice. And this choice comes down to, I think, who is the most competent, knowledgeable person for the job with the ability to do the job. The Bayfield County judgeship, like any judgeship, is an important position. It may not be the most important, but it's pretty high up there. This is one of those ones that are near the top of the list. Not everybody can do this job. It's not for everybody. You got to have a thick skin, because people are not going to be happy with everything you do. They just aren't going to do it. Half the people that walk out of the courtroom probably are not going to be happy with the decision. I get it. I got big shoulders. I can take it. I'm built for the job. Trust me. So the Andersons, we got big shoulders, physically and metaphorically speaking. So, but anyway, I appreciate your time, but I do want to make an announcement. One of the things that I and Sheriff Sasenka have pushed for years is, to do these evidence-based practices in jail programs and treatment courts, we have to measure the outcomes. We've got to figure out, is it working, right? Is it working? So how do you do that? It's called data. It's called information. So right now, we get information from law enforcement, the courts, the DA, FBI, Department of Justice. Trying to get all that information together to synthesize it is not easy. And every once in a while, we have to do a big push to figure out what is our data telling us. And it takes a huge amount of effort, and we can only do it once every 3 or 4 years because it takes so much time. Now, after a lot of pushing and an awful lot of, hair loss on behalf of the judge and the sheriff a little bit, we have now created what's called a data dashboard. We are going to be able to synthesize and take a look at all that data in basically a real-time method so that we can now measure what we're doing in the criminal and juvenile justice system. So that when it's time to make decisions about what programs are we going to do with our limited resources and our grants that are going to reduce recidivism and have better outcomes, we can now figure out what they are. We can measure how effective is what we're doing. And for the first time, and we're one of the few counties that are doing this, and we're way out on the edge of it, but I'm really excited about this. It's not just for me, because someday there's going to be another judge. It's really, the sheriff and I felt all along, we have to build a process that survives personalities so that whoever takes over will have the benefit of having this in place. And that's what we're trying to do. So, I promise to be short, just too long. Anybody have any questions? You don't get a chance to take your shots at the judge too often. So,
Metaphorically speaking.
Metaphorically speaking. Anybody got any questions?
Real quick, is teen court something that you're involved with?
Well, no. I mean, I wish teen court, we used to have a pretty active teen court in Bayfield County. And we, unfortunately, we don't anymore. It's still there. I mean, I'm involved in it from the standpoint that I help authorize it, but it's run right now through the extension office. And for those who don't, teen court, I mean, teenagers, high school kids, sit on as a decision-making body over juvenile cases for a young first-time offender who would not be suitable to go through the juvenile justice system, where they're going to file a complaint. This is going to be for those kids that are really, really low risk, and we're going to kind of divert them into a different program. Because we do diversion programs for adults, and they're pretty successful in doing that. But this is for that group. Unfortunately, the Department of Human Services has to figure out which group, which set of kids would fit into that category. And juvenile crime has gone way down. In most places. Bayfield County, quite a bit down. And the problem is that while the juvenile crime has gone down, the juvenile crime that does exist is pretty serious. In other words, we don't have a lot of those little ticky-tack things that, your typical teenager might do that would be, they're low-risk individuals and they didn't cause any harm. We're not seeing a lot of that. And there's a lot of parents here that know. Dave knows darn well that he's got teenagers and they never leave the house anymore. Now, even when COVID wasn't here, they never leave the house anymore. When my kids were, they weren't that long ago, and I'd be like, hey, guys, get out of here. But they don't want to. So they're not running around the streets causing the same kind of trouble that they did 20, 30, 40 years ago. And you can see it anecdotally. They're just not out and about. They're home. Why? Well, because they have their iPhones and other things, and that's what they're doing. So that type of crime has gone down. We're just not getting good referrals because we don't have that group of low-risk individuals that fit that category. Now, is that a good thing? Well, I suppose they don't, they're not getting in trouble, so that's a good thing. But the teen court's a great idea if we could find people for it.
Sure. Thank you. Appreciate that.
That was probably a really long explanation.
I want to know too, so thank you.
Okay. Any other questions, comments? Okay, well, thank you very much. I've got to head up to Port Wing. And Mr. Curva, it's good to see you. See you on the campaign trail. And good night, everyone. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your time. Really appreciate it. And next, I would actually look for a motion to amend the agenda. Dan Clark is here for one of our items that's later down on the agenda and has another commitment. And I would appreciate if someone wouldn't mind making a motion to amend the agenda to move that item up.
Madam Mayor, I will make the motion to move the discussion and action on recommendation to provide bonus compensation for qualifying EMTs next on our agenda.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Motion by Karen, second by Tom to move the agenda item stated to the next item. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. So this is under tab 5 in your packet. And I think, as it states in the memo, this is not an item that's requesting additional funds at this time. Let me actually start by saying thank you to Dan and all of the EMTs, Carl, everybody who serves on the ambulance, because I don't know what we would do without you. And it's greatly appreciated when I hear the siren or when I see you go by. It's that reminder that somebody's there to help, and we really appreciate that. I think I can speak for all of us on that. This past year, you were pushed to your limits and beyond, and I don't know if anyone has any questions to ask of Dan tonight, but I certainly, for one, want to see something that we can do to show our appreciation for our ambulance crew that did meet this threshold and really stepped up and went above and beyond. Due to COVID, certain people chose to or couldn't help as much as they normally would have. And so between the reduction in the number of people able to take calls and the increase in calls overall, which was quite substantial, it was really no easy feat, I guess, to get through the year. And unfortunately, we didn't get to this place a little bit sooner. But since we're here now, this is the way that Scott helped figure out how we might be able to do this. Karen?
Madam Mayor, just on behalf of the Personnel and Finance Committee, we met with Dan and Don Belisle, 2-3 weeks ago.
Oh, Jeff Belisle.
Jeff Belisle. And talked at length about just the things that you summarized so well, recognizing the burden on the EMTs, and our recommendation to the council for consideration is that $4,500 be utilized for bonuses to the 10 EMTs that fall within the criteria that Dan has identified.
Was that a motion?
No, it could be a motion, though. I would so move that we authorize the ambulance department to identify in their budget $4,500, that money be utilized for bonuses for the 10 EMTs, the bonus amount $450, who have met the standard for the full 2020 length of service award.
Second.
Thank you, Karen. And that was a second by Laura. Is there any further discussion, or does anyone have questions, Dan? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Oh, one abstention, thank you. Excellent.
Thank you very much, and just a real quick, it takes a team, and it takes the families also. And a lot of the family members actually, when they see their family member going out on these calls, they're quite afraid of what they're exposing them to when they watch the news. And so the stress level with them has also been increased. But it's the whole crew that needs the thanks. I'm just a little piece of the pie on that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
I've got another meeting to head off to.
Very good, thank you. Okay, then we are going to move on back to tab 2 for our next agenda item, which is update, discussion, and action on ordinance 21-002, amending the city's code of ordinances to regulate commercial activity on city property. I would like to just introduce this item by saying that we did have an information session the other day, and we have also received input other than during that information session on this item. And so I feel like there is work already to be done on recrafting some of the wording to this, and so I would not recommend that we take action at this time on this item. I guess there could be a motion to postpone. Do we need a motion, or can we just take no action?
I would advise, I don't think taking further action is necessary. We'll have the understanding that this item will come back to council once we have a revised draft ordinance for consideration, which we will work on in reasonable time here.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions? Otherwise, I would suggest, if you do have input that you'd like to have included that you haven't yet provided, email Tony with that. Tony is collecting the input on this item.
Correct.
And that's ASSTADMIN at cityofwashburn.org.
Correct. Did the chamber, did they send out a notice to the business community?
They did, yes. The chamber sent out a notice, and actually there was some misinformation in there that Melissa then corrected. The notice went out saying that all businesses were going to have to pay for a permit, and that is not true. There are a number of exceptions. And so that was clarified. And yes, so thank you. That she did communicate to the member businesses of the chamber at least, that this ordinance is being looked at for revisions.
Jen has her hand raised.
Thank you. Jen?
I think the session that we had was recorded, correct?
Correct.
I'm not sure how many council members were on that. I attended it, but I think I just suggest listening to the recording of it, because there's definitely some concerns brought forward. But I think we can address them all, well, at least a portion of them, but I'd suggest listening to the recording.
And where can we find the recording, Tony, or where we'll be able to? Is that something that we put out on the YouTube channel? Or is that something that counselors can refer to with a link, or?
It wasn't on YouTube, was it?
No, we'll have to experiment.
Okay, we'll figure out how that recording can be made available if anyone would like to watch that.
I'd like to know how. Yeah, so if you could email, let us know.
Okay.
Once you figure it out.
Okay, very good. So,
I would move we postpone this item until a more suitable draft can be debated upon.
okay,
I'll second that.
motion by Dave to postpone until we have a new updated draft, and a second by Tom. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next item on our agenda, discussion and action on western boundary of decorative light poles for the Basin Street reconstruction project in 2024. And that is tab 3 of your packet. So just a quick recap. I know Scott did a good job recapping in the memo, but just to reiterate, the decision on this item that happened in April was right before I became mayor, and so I didn't realize until recently that we were going to have to revisit this. And at that time, I went back and watched the meeting so that I could get caught up to speed on it, on the original decision, and realized that we really did need to get some public input on it. That was the desire of the council at that time. And so I did the quick survey thinking that we were going to need results immediately, and realized that we had a little more time than that. But it was good to get the number of results that we did, I think, with the survey, to at least gauge the public interest on this topic and their desire to have the decorative lighting go as far as possible, it sounds like, is the desire there overwhelmingly. That is one of many factors that we will have to take into consideration in making this decision. If the council does want to change the decision from the Fifth Avenue West border to extend it out further, given the high level of desire by the community to extend it down further. Something, I think Scott brought up a good point about the fact that we do have downtown zoning code that has specific boundaries. And it's a little bit hard to see in this small version in the packet. And I don't know, Scott, if you're, I guess we have a big version up on the wall here too. So zone 1, the outdoor lighting district, is that, I'm not sure which square goes with which circle there. Could you walk us through the different, those different zones, or point out where the zone ends?
Mary's analyze.
So my argument here is basically we have 3 commercial zones. It's going to be the dark red, kind of this
Coral.
peachish color, and then the light pink. Okay, so the red zone is what we consider the downtown core. That goes from roughly here 1st Avenue East to 4th Avenue West. So that would be the intersection with Patsy's, and then across the street, City Garage would start the next. No, the post office block there, yeah, sorry. So Patsy's, and then from 4th to 8th is the next section of the general commercial. So in the downtown core, it's pretty much strictly business. You can't have residents unless it's in the back of the building or on the 2nd floor. Then in the next section, it's more of the what I would call kind of the suburban type businesses. They're a little more spread out. We don't encourage residences in this area. They can be done through a conditional use, but that's not what the area is really intended for. So that goes from 4th until 8th. And then after 8th, we have the cottage commercial. This is kind of more of the mix of residential and small commercial businesses in this area. So those are kind of the 3 distinct fields that we have here.
Okay.
And so when you brought up the outdoor lighting, that is that's more of the intensity of the lighting, which is allowed in this area. The rest of the city is any sort of new businesses and whatnot. We don't want strong lighting in that area, trying to keep it dark. But the outdoor lighting district encompasses more than the commercial. It goes down to the lake and the industrial areas, but that does basically cover all of the downtown core and then up to 8th Avenue as well. So.
Okay, thank you. So I'm going to talk a little bit for a minute here about cost. Obviously, decorative lighting costs twice as much, I would say, if you go for the high-end, most flexibility, nice-looking decorative lighting is twice as much as basic lighting that we have up there currently owned by itself. The DOT in this project is on the hook for part of the replacement cost of the light poles, since they have to come down to do the work that they need to do. We just today saw some figures with estimates of what that cost would cover. That estimate that they gave us was for the whole phase 1 of replacement of similar lighting to what's there, okay? So the difference in what they're going to replace and what we would have to pay is, you take the number of light poles that it takes to cover whatever area we decide we want to cover. Then you have to think about, is the light pole going to give the same amount of light with the fixture that you choose, or are you going to have to add more poles in because the decorative poles sometimes are shorter, depending on what is chosen. So there's a possibility that you even have more poles to replace than the number that are there currently, to get the same amount of light to cover the roadway. So something else to think about. But the difference is, you take their estimate of what they gave us, and then you subtract, or I guess you add in extra for the number of poles that we would be doing in a decorative fashion. We don't know exactly what that amount is, so it's really hard to make a decision when you really don't know what the cost is going to be. And we're really basing this on what makes sense and what the desire of the community is. This is our chance for the next number of decades to decide what our downtown lighting is going to look like. And that is a part of what is going to be attractive to people, to our community. So it is an important decision, and I think it definitely deserves some thought. And I'm glad that we had a chance to bring this back just for another look before we proceed. And having said that, I don't know if we need a motion before we have some discussion on potentially a new border of where we want to see decorative lighting, or to keep it the same as was decided in April at 5th Street, or 5th Avenue. And I'll say just one more quick thing. So the 5th Avenue doesn't meet either of the borders of those districts. And so to me it would make sense to go along with the plan. The zoning districts are there, hopefully for a reason, to guide these types of decisions. On the other hand, you know that we're going to have to figure out how to pay for these decorative light poles. Or at least it's only part of it, because the project is being paid for in part by the DOT. So this is our chance to do this right. So, Mary?
So we got prices that should be out there. I mean, you guys would have gotten the email.
Do you have it? Is that what you printed there?
Yeah,
I'm
and
trying to
this is
reread
the-
it here. I think I printed.
Is that with those new estimates from the DOT? Or?
No, it was one that he sent on the 4th.
Okay.
So people can wrap their heads, at least get an idea of the kind of numbers we're talking about. Didn't come in your box?
Is it in the binder?
No, it was a message I sent out last Friday.
Oh, okay.
Madam Mayor, I have just a comment. I think it was, it's great to have a survey, because it gives us yet another piece of information. I think that we also have to recognize that 294 responses is about 14% of our population, assuming that all 294 have come from the community. And 184, which said 9th Avenue, is about 9% of our total population. Having said that, that doesn't mean I'm not negating those comments. There were 184 people that said, light it up, the length of what they identify as Main Street. But having said that, if we look at $400,000 to $475,000 potentially, knowing that we've got to get more detail in terms of the price tag on the light poles, that could be, $40 or $46 per $100,000 evaluation per taxpayer in the community. And the survey wasn't taken with that additional information, and probably didn't want to. I wouldn't have put it in the survey either, because it makes it too complicated and hard for people to understand. But it is, I think, our responsibility to say what is a legitimate boundary for our community, given our financial situation, and not just our financial situation, because I agree, it's a decision that has lasting impact for 20, 40 years. And we want our community to look nice. There's no question about that. So I guess I have difficulty with Ninth Avenue. I think that's too far. I'm looking at something less than Ninth Avenue to start the discussion. Perhaps we can look beyond Fifth, but that's where I'm at.
Scott?
So, just so everyone's clear, based on that estimate I had put out there on Friday, we knew that the DOT was going to be covering a portion of that cost, but I had really no idea how much that was going to be. So, based on the figures that I saw today, but I don't have, the documents have not been sent to me, but they showed it on the screen. I would, based on that estimate, I would cut my figure basically in half.
Oh, you think that they would pay that much? I mean, ante up that much?
Yes.
Okay, all right. Well, so it's $20 per 100,000.
So, I mean, I'm going based on what they showed.
Right.
You know, so.
We all saw it.
Okay. All right, well, that's good news.
So that's where I, just want to make sure everyone is aware of that. That's what has been presented to us anyway.
Okay.
Now, keeping in mind, that does not take into consideration any of the costs of new banners or flags or those types of things that we want to see on the poles too. And that's a whole separate issue that we're not talking about. The electrical's included in the estimate.
Is it?
Yes, they broke it down by every single component of that pole, including the electrical and the box.
For outlets.
Well, no, I don't know about
Oh, I'm
outlets.
talking about extra electrical.
Extra electrical,
You
yeah,
have
okay,
Christmas
yeah.
lights, so you would have to.
The poles would be designed to accommodate that.
Okay,
Yes, that is factored in.
okay.
Laura, sorry, hold on. Laura?
Oh, sorry. I'm wondering if, because we don't have any clear idea of what kind of poles we want to use, the idea of knowing how far we want to go is the wiring different for this decorative lighting than for the street lights that already exist? What is the purpose?
I would say that our estimate is pretty solid on that. There's going to be some variation depending on what type of pole we would use, but I don't think, at this point, don't go too far into the weeds on that.
Well, the reason I ask though is because if it is very different kind of wiring, then they really need to know how far we're going with that type of pole. Then it matters.
What we're assuming is all the wiring has to be replaced. As far as we know, the wiring because when the pole, the existing lights were last done in 2009, they reused all that wiring. How long those poles were up prior to that, I cannot say. That could be original wiring from the 76 project.
Oh, wow.
So,
Jerry has his hand up.
Sure, real quick, I had Dave. Were you done, Laura,
Sure.
for now?
Does the DOT give us a requirement for the amount of lumens on the highway passing through town? And if so, if we shorten the pole, let's say with a more decorative light, and we're obviously going to need more lights along the way, and your estimate, has you taken that into consideration to possibly doubling the amount of lights we have?
I don't think we would have to double it.
correct. I really don't have the ability to refine the estimate to that point at this time.
But there is a chance that the decorative poles wouldn't be that different, and that there could be a similar amount of light at the height that we're able to get with a decorative pole that would make it so that maybe we can just put them in the same locations. We just don't know that yet, but they do need to know this decision so that they can continue with the engineering work. They're waiting for this decision. Real quick, I'm going to get Jerry.
Jen has her hand up too.
And then Tom, and then Jen. Jerry?
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, thanks for being here, Jerry.
Oh, okay, you're welcome.
Carl just asked her.
The only thing I wanted to add that really wasn't brought up was that the decorative poles will belong to the city, along with the maintenance for the duration of their lifespan. If I'm correct with that, right, Scott?
That would be correct.
I think. So that would be, once you purchase these poles, you own them. What you decide to do with them and the maintenance through their lifespan will come back to the city.
Right, you break it, you bought it.
So I just thought I'd mention that, that's all.
Thank you. Okay, Tom?
You're saying that with what they're paying, we can go farther that way, or, because I'm still stuck with, we should stay with the business, the core of the business downtown, with the decorative lights.
I'm not saying that we can, whether or not we can afford it, we will just need to plan for that, because there are other costs that we don't know about yet. We know for the items that we've requested, such as for bump outs and whatnot, there will be a cost to us for that. We had, I don't want to go too far down a rabbit hole here, but we had a few issues that came up today that kind of have me concerned. And if there's other amenities that we would decide to do or want to do, we're gonna have to get into, I think, some rough negotiation with the DOT. So, we haven't even discussed the exact costs of the water and sewer portion of the project either. Now, we're hopeful that, of course, that there will be grant portions that will help cover that water and sewer side of things. But as far as the amenities and decorations, there is very little out there. And so I think the likelihood of those items being covered by any other sort of program is minimal. So we have to assume that whatever amenities that we want, we are going to have to pay for.
And real quick, before Jen, you'll go next, I'm just going to clarify. So for phase 1, we're starting at Washington. Well, that's one end of the project. To 4th Avenue is only 2 blocks. Is that correct?
3.
It is 3? Do you count? Because it goes 3rd Avenue is the next,
Here, third.
and then 4th. So it's
Okay,
really only 2 blocks.
Yes.
So we're talking about, in this phase, only 2 blocks of decorative lighting that would be accomplished. We're not making the decision for the east end, although we know that it will likely be 1st Avenue East. So I don't know if that matters, but since it'll be staggered to some extent.
We have, at this point, we have to, when we put this together, we'll be financially be basically planning both phases of the project.
Okay.
And,
Yes.
our motion in April was 5th Avenue.
Correct. Jen?
I have a couple of questions, and forgive me if they've already been answered. The conversation I can follow pretty well tonight. Dave Anderson, I cannot hear you at all, so you're going to have to speak up a little bit, please.
Maybe you could grab that other mic. Now that that's done. Okay, Jen, go ahead.
Okay. Scott, in your memo, you said, or in your email, you said that our lighting that we currently have is one step down from the DOT standard. And so, in order for us, do we have to, are we gonna have to go up to DOT standard for our entire project that's being undertaken? And what does that involve? Because do they just add bigger lights? Or do they have to replace the poles and do something different with the electrical?
Jen,
my question comes down to, if we're gonna be spending money on these poles and have to do a bunch of work for them just to replace them, I'm fine with the decorative poles being in our commercial area, but I don't want it to be funky where it's like one thing and then runs into another for an aesthetic kind of flow. Like if you look at some of the other places that have been redone, like for example, Ashland, it's a long, they do a long thing of their historic, their decorative poles. Same thing with Bayfield. It starts at the top of the hill and it kind of gradually goes, goes through the whole, top. So I guess that was my question. So thanks.
So to go back to the beginning of your question, Jen, it's actually the opposite. The DOT standard would be the step down.
Jen, just to clarify, are you talking about the difference between our existing lights and the DOT standard?
Yeah, I guess I read that wrong. I thought that we were under the standard, but we're over the standard. So the current light posts that we have, they don't need to be replaced, even if they're in the way of the repaving and the whole thing?
So to answer that question, the existing light poles will need to be at least temporarily removed for the project, because they're going to be digging and tearing everything up. They're going to be in the way. The existing light poles can be replaced and reused here if we want to, and that is certainly an option that we will be considering for areas outside of the decorative zone. Okay, because in looking at some of the figures, again, which have not actually been provided to me yet, that we saw today, it will be more expensive if we went to the DOT standard as opposed to reusing the existing poles through Excel. And again, as Jerry had mentioned in his comments, if we go down to the DOT standard, those now, we're responsible for the maintenance of those poles. Whereas the existing poles are Excel's poles, they are responsible for the maintenance.
And actually, the DOT poles would cost more than salvaging the existing poles. So on top of the fact that we would then have to take over the maintenance, it actually would cost a little more to do that. Does that answer your first question, Jen?
Yeah, I guess that's the, but also so, yeah, I'm just trying to make sure that I understand everything correctly. I mean, reusing our poles because they're in good shape and that Excel will maintain them, but yet then we don't have control over them and they might not match in as well and be as decorative as the ones that we have downtown.
So, and just a quick point to that, I've been really trying to notice as I've had to travel a little bit back and forth to Madison, going through some of the cities that have decorative lighting in their downtowns. And really, it's all over the board how it happens. Some cities have multiple types of lights transitioning. Some, it literally goes from the tall kind like we have down to the short little decorative kind, with no transition and no, it's just like that's their declaration of this is our downtown decorative district now. So I don't think we have to think too hard about that transition. I think it just is what it is. We have the kind that we have now, and then at some point along that entrance into the city, it'll switch to the decorative lighting. Did you have another question, Jen?
Well, I guess I disagree a little bit that we do have to think about it now, because depending on how far we go out with our decorative plan, which right now we have that doesn't match the comprehensive plan, that to me that transition is kind of important. I mean, not hugely important, but I think we should at least think about it a little bit. I can't visualize the difference between the poles that we're talking about getting and that we would own and that are expensive versus the ones that we have. I mean, I obviously know the ones that we have, I don't think they're that bad, but we also have issues that we can't put things on them. But I mean, I think, so I'm fine. I just think that we should think about the transition a little bit. And then my other comment would be, when I'm looking through the notes, we did not look, and I don't know why. I don't know why we didn't have them jive with the original comprehensive zones for the plan. So I do like the idea of the downtown commercial zone being that where we really focus on. So that's all I have. Thank you.
Sure, and I didn't mean to imply that we shouldn't think about the transition at all, because I think you do need to think about when you want the transition to start. It's just, you can't really control how the transition occurs, it just happens. So that's what I meant by that part. But yes, we obviously want to think about the transition in terms of when it should begin, and when you think that it makes sense for people to feel like they're now entering downtown. Does anyone else, Mary, go ahead.
No, just to Jerry's point, if y'all pay attention when you drive over to Ashland, how many poles don't exist there anymore? These are poles that are going to be salted throughout the winter time. So if we're going to own and we have to deal with the maintenance, we should be aware of the costs. Because I've been over to Ashland enough times to count all the missing ones and all the bad ones, and they're not at this point replacing any of the missing ones.
And just to that point, we did learn from that, and we would be getting a different material. You know, it would be aluminum instead of iron.
Again, but price is
or
all,
steel.
Yeah.
Correct, but that's all in, that's the type of pole that's in the estimate. But definitely something to think about is that maintenance and eventual replacement. Dave?
So, to the transition.
Can you speak up a little?
As far as the transition goes, the street lights that we have now are meant to not be noticed, and the decorative ones are meant to be noticed. So I don't see a problem with having one stop and one start. I think that's the way it should be, quite honestly. Where we start and stop them is the question.
Right.
That's the question.
So
Hey, Dave,
yeah.
can you clarify why you say that the ones that we have now are to not be noticed? Because they're kind of set back and tall, and tell me why you think they're designed to not be noticed versus the ones that are to be noticed.
They're meant not to be noticed because they're ugly. and it's a utility pole. I mean,
It's not designed to draw attention to it.
Yeah, right. And the other reason they may draw attention to them now is because we're hanging banners from them. And, you know, in the wintertime, you may have Christmas lights if that would have been an option at the time. But, you know, during normal times, if you don't have banners, people don't really even notice them, quite honestly. If you drive through any town without banners on them, you probably don't even know that they're there. So, and the decorative lights are obviously meant to catch your eye and distinguish a place. And as far as where we start, you know, I'm torn. You know, obviously it'd be nice to put them throughout the entire town, but we don't, you know, we don't know exactly where commercial enterprise is going to be in 30 years or 50 years from now. We have no idea, and by that time we'll probably be replacing them anyway. But you know, I guess if it was up to me, it would be the block starting at South Shore Brewery and heading east from there.
That'd be 6th Avenue.
Yeah.
So that'd be 6th. I forgot to ask today, and I wish I had, if it costs less to change from more decorative lights in the design to less versus going the other way, or if it would be the same to redesign.
It would be the same. It would require re-engineering.
I'm still trying to wrap my head around why they need this decision before we decide the type of light to know how far apart those lights are going to be. But I guess they just need the edge.
they need the edge so they know where they can finish off
Okay.
certain portions of the project.
So we would still have some control over the cost depending on the type of light that we choose. Okay, so even if we decide, whatever boundary,
Have we seen choices?
not.
I have, Scott and I have.
I
Well, we
mean,
did when
a
it
little,
was presented.
there have been some links out there, but the committee is trying, or is it a committee? The group is trying to narrow down those choices a little bit because it's all over the board. And so we're trying to come up with a smaller, list of choices that we can choose from that meet the criteria that we need to provide enough light and keep them hopefully spaced out far enough and that sort of thing. So we haven't seen any actual choices yet. We've just seen many options are out there. I mean, anything you look at, if you just Google street lights, you're going to get all sorts of choices.
I can tell you that we're pretty much unified on the type of pole we want. We, in general, agree with the type of base that we want. We know that we will want a glass fixture, not a plastic fixture, to make sure it doesn't color or yellow with age.
And provide more light.
And provide more light. And so we're trying to narrow some of that down, but give you some some choices on some styles that you can pick from. So trying to narrow it down a little bit so we can have I think a reasonable discussion on that. And that will be coming here probably within the next month or two.
Okay, so tonight we're just looking for a boundary.
That edge, that western boundary, revisiting that. Laura?
Yeah, so the reason I was asking about the wiring was because if it doesn't matter, isn't that something that we could choose to reuse our lights? If we account for wanting to have decorative lighting all the way down, outside of town, whatever, to 8th, say sticking with the zoning boundaries, could we choose to not use decorative lighting all the way down in the future if we realize, this isn't going to work? If it's the same wiring, can we just reuse the lights we have? Or why do they need a commitment to what kind of pole it's going to be?
Okay.
That's still not.
So what we're trying to keep this project on track. We're coming up on a deadline here, so they have to have 30% of this thing done and begin to schedule their first public hearing. We're trying not to go back and rehash and redo work and decisions that we've already made, and so we are on a very tight timeline to keep this thing going so that we actually have a project in 2024. If we make those changes after these deadlines, we will be responsible for the additional engineering costs on that. How much that will be, I cannot say. I don't know, but they will send us a bill. We're just trying to avoid getting more bills and delaying the project because this will require them to then redo, if the fixture is a little different and so forth, then they may have to put in more circuits or more bases or whatever along there. So if we narrow our boundary, they know that we're focusing on lighting in this area, it's going to be a little bit different. They can get the rest of the areas done.
And then there's also another repercussion of if there is a delay, then there's a delay in letting the bid, and because of the timing of when it's scheduled to be let, there could be further delay in just the availability of, because they can only let so many projects, it's like we just need to do what they need at a certain time, and even though we may not understand exactly why.
Okay. So the wiring was the first question because I didn't understand why the wiring's the same, why we can't change our mind later. But the second part of that is, say we stopped at 4th and stuck to the boundaries that already exist, and another 5 years down the road, this is something we realize that we can afford, there's enough there are enough businesses starting to fill in the open spaces, and we want to carry them down further or change the existing poles to something new. We can do that at any time, can't we? Can we replace these poles as needed?
Well, that would be more of an undertaking than you might think.
Right, I don't know, so that's why I'm asking.
So in the area outside of our, what we're going to call our decorative zone, if that is Excel's poles, that will be Excel's wiring, not our wires. It's going to be on a separate circuit. Okay, so not necessarily, not easily, not without causing more construction and more cost. That was the issue that we faced some 12, 13 years ago when these went up, is Excel told us if you want your own decorative lighting, you are paying for everything. You are paying for the wiring, you are paying for the poles, you are paying, we are going to be out of it. And so that was a completely different project that the city could not afford at that time.
Okay.
As far as the wiring goes, any place the sidewalk's gonna get tore up, the wiring is gonna be tore up with it.
Which is going all the way down to 8, anyway, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, very little of the street lighting wiring is gonna be saved. It'll all be junk pile and gone, and all the wires will go in regardless of whether or not we keep what we have.
So with all of these elements out there, let's go back to thinking of where you want to see the decorative lighting end on the western boundary. Tom?
I'll make a motion that ends at 6th Avenue and goes to 1st Avenue East. I think that's, somewhere, I think it was 5th Avenue was before.
Mm-hmm.
There's just one extra block.
Okay, so Tom's motion is to end the lighting on the west at 6th Avenue, not in conjunction with either of the districts, but kind of in the middle of the two. Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second.
Second by Dave. Further discussion?
Yeah, I would like to address the discussion we had last time that was, I think we've been talking about ending it at 4th, and we discussed it for a long time. And the thought was that I would like to have streets lit up in a personable, cozy manner that also looks good when you drive through, that indicates to traffic that you're coming to a place where there are pedestrians. We like to encourage pedestrians all the way down to the park, which would be going to 8th. And there are businesses all along there. However, looking at Google Earth now, I'm looking at all these spaces. Once you get past the current downtown commercial district, it starts to open up. There are bigger green spaces, fewer businesses that pedestrians would have reason to frequent. I pushed last time for 5th because it went past the post office and came to a coffee shop that currently is frequently visited, and it makes sense to have it feel like it's where you should be walking. And it would be a visual, to me, indicator that these are encouraged pedestrian paths. But now that I'm looking at it, there's a lot of open space between 4th and 5th. And again, we don't know what's going to happen in the future, so if it wasn't a matter of $40 per lineal foot, was that it for the wiring if we were putting up our own posts? And the maintenance, I would encourage all the way to 8th, and that was where I stood earlier in the day. But now, instead of even 5th, I would stick to the zoning boundary with 4th, because I feel like there's a reason then. We've decided based on the zoning district that exists now. It would save us a lot of money. The overhead lighting that goes out, it might not look right with the pedestrian lighting we choose, but it's something that already exists. And if somebody, it's expensive, you know, Excel's responsibility to maintain their wiring, so we don't have to pay for the wiring for all of those. So I feel like 6th is choosing a couple of businesses to want to light up to, and it doesn't seem right to me to just choose a place in between two zoning districts
Okay.
right now.
So our motion is for 6th. So there's an argument not for a no to that.
That's why I was
Does anyone else have anything they want to say before we vote on the 6th Avenue boundary? Karen?
Just to remind us that we said 5th last time.
Correct.
That was our motion in April.
Correct. And just to real quick draw your attention to that, to the survey where it just talks about which businesses are on those blocks. So 5th Avenue West does include the post office and Wiki Candle, and then 6th Avenue includes North Coast Coffee and South Shore Brewery Tap House. And then 7th, you know, more of a gap, like you say, in 8th, and then down to Nicholsworth. So just to give yourself that perspective of which businesses are on those blocks. So motion is for 6th. Any other questions, comments, or discussion on this before that vote is taken? Okay, seeing none. Do we need to do a roll call, or let's see what we end up with? All in favor? Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
It sounds like the...
That's
Jen,
Jennifer.
are you,
Jen, were you able to vote?
I said aye.
Okay.
okay.
So it sounds like that motion passes, and the boundary will be 6th Avenue West. Thank you all for your consideration of that. I think that was tough. But I think that's, you know, it's a good decision. It's not going to make complete sense because we don't have all the, you know, the factors. So it's tough, but thank you. Appreciate that.
I think it'll be good.
Okay. With that one down, we will move on to our next item, which is discussion and action on left turn lane design options for Phase 1 Bayfield Street reconstruction project in 2024 at the intersection or intersections of Washington Avenue and 3rd Avenue West.
You want this?
Does anyone, so I guess just to back up again, this is one of a couple of decisions that need to get made in order to proceed with the design. The other place that has already been decided to have a left turn lane is at 8th Avenue, and that has already been figured out. Is that correct?
That request has been given to the DOT, so.
So that has already been discussed and had the public input. Now this is the other one that was decided we needed a left turn solution for. I think the reason they wanted to give an option here because they were not sure at the time that they started this design work for this intersection or intersections, they were not sure of the semi-traffic patterns. And since then, we've had some discussions about that and realized that, you know, where those patterns are now. So the couple things that I see here are, one, where is the problem existing? And I think a lot of times you see two cars both at Washington turning left at the same time. If you were to move that other left turn lane instead over to 3rd Avenue West, not only are you losing the parking, but then you're losing the bump outs that make it safer for the pedestrian crossing. And for those reasons, I don't think that's a good option, but I am certainly open to a motion one way or the other. Tom?
Last time we discussed this, the business owners didn't want the left turn lanes because it take away parking and hurt them. We've come up with bump outs here on Washington Avenue and on 3rd Avenue West. And at that time, Dave was here and he expressed his displeasure in left turn lanes downtown because it take away from parking.
Sure, and I think the DOT heard that and did make some changes to the design and reduced the amount of bump out. They said that they can actually shorten it so that it doesn't take up as much parking space. It doesn't have to go out as far. So some of those aspects are malleable. Karen?
Am I correct as I read these two options that option 1 retains the most parking, option 2 has less parking?
Correct.
Okay. And just for comment, my concern when we first visited this issue was the bump outs on 3rd. I think those are critical, and for that reason I don't support option 2 because it takes away 2 bump outs. And that was the intersection, in addition to Washington, but the intersection that I was concerned about because it has a lot of kids that are coming from high school and not paying attention, or other people not paying. I don't mean to say the kids aren't paying attention, but I would support option 1.
Is that a motion?
I would so move that that option 1 be selected.
I'll second that.
Motion by Karen, second by Tom to choose option 1, keeping the left turn lanes at Washington Avenue.
No, it's bump outs, no left turn lanes, bump outs.
This,
There's left turn lane.
No, there's a turn lane
these are the left turn lanes.
for option 1, yes.
Option 1
I
is,
don't want turn lanes.
well, they're in,
I'll
I
take
think
it
that,
second.
I think that decision has already been made to have left turn at Washington in the past, and so now we're just deciding which way to do it. Whether they would both be at Washington, or whether the northbound left turn lane would be at Washington and the southbound left turn would be at 3rd Avenue West. So do you withdraw your second to that motion?
I'll second it.
Okay, second by Carl then. The other thing that there's a question about apparently is the bike lane. There seems to be some confusion on the part of the DOT about whether or not we are required to have a bike lane specifically on the highway in downtown. And we're waiting on an answer for that now. What that would do is potentially change, the design of the corner a little bit so that maybe we wouldn't lose as much parking. So none of this is cut and dry, unfortunately. It's just the basic concept, and the details get ironed out as we go and we represent what everybody's desire is, to make sure that we advocate for our businesses and our pedestrians and our residents in general in these discussions. So, but this, the left turn lane question, I think, has already been answered in that we have a decision that we wanted left turn lanes at Washington Avenue, and it was plural, both ways. And the only option other than that is this other option to have one of them going down to 3rd Avenue West heading south. So that's the decision we have before us, is the choice between both at Washington or the northbound at Washington and the southbound at 3rd Avenue West. So, Scott, go ahead.
No, I was just going to ask you, Madam Mayor, if you also had a conversation with IGA?
I did. I forgot. Thank you. I spoke with Greg Hansen at the IGA the other day, and he had had a chance to review, but hadn't had a chance to get back to us yet. And so he told me that he definitely has people who park on that area in front of the IGA with campers or trailers behind a large vehicle, and so it is convenient for them. He said it's not going to make or break his business, but is it nice to have that parking? Yes. And so he would prefer to just have the turn lanes together over here and not split it up and get rid of that parking in front of the IGA. And that's, you know, they're obviously a big business here in town. They're one of our anchor businesses.
He's in favor of the left-hand turn lane at Washington only.
Correct. Option 1.
Do we know how many parking spaces we will lose at the Washington Avenue intersection?
Is it the one? I don't know if we have a hard answer to that, but I don't think we're going to lose very much. They heard very strongly from us that we wanted to lose as little parking as possible.
And I know we're bound to lose something. It's you know, parking in Washburn's at a premium, so.
Scott?
I can tell you that we were going to lose a spot or two by Coco's anyway, because the current setup is not up to standard, because you can't have a parking space between the intersection and your crosswalk. So that's part of that design that we were working on. There may be one spot in front of the City Hall, which doesn't get too many people parking right there at the corner. And then there, because of the driveway access at the Midland station here, I don't think, there might be one, but there's either one or none lost at this corner, so.
Okay.
It's more reshaping the intersection. So I agree with Scott's assessment of how much parking we're talking about. Karen?
But as I remember it, on 3rd, weren't we talking at least one parking space for the bump outs there?
In addition to losing the parking on Bayfield Street in front of the IGA?
No, I'm not talking in front of the IGA, I'm talking about not in front, but where the bump outs would be. That there might be one or half a stall and might have to be reconfigured, because they're going to take up some of the existing, that like in front of Snug, there might be
Correct. I mean,
some.
Which actually might not be a bad thing, because it's a really terrible intersection to
Well, that's
see
why
as
I
you're coming out.
Yeah.
That's the worst one, because in order to see if there's an oncoming car in that lane, you have to pull out into that lane.
Right.
Exactly.
So if you get rid of the bump out, which you would have to get rid of if you're putting a turn lane there, then you're back to having terrible vision again. So if you keep all 4 bump outs at 3rd Avenue, it's better all the way around, I think, for pedestrians and for...
Excuse me, I just didn't want us to say, no, we're not losing any parking on 3rd, because we might lose at least some.
Sure.
And I don't know how they will configure it. They may have to restripe it and make them wide.
Yeah.
Tony?
Jen has her hand raised.
Thank you. Jen?
Yeah, thanks for the conversation. I have a question. If we could, at some point, go over the questions that we got from Mary Nowakowski. I think some of them we've talked about. One of the questions I have is when you talked to the IGA, was there any discussion on the semi-trucks that service the IGA?
Yes.
And maybe I missed the conversation, but I don't think we've talked about that.
No, I don't think I shared that, but yes, I confirmed with Mr. Hansen that the the semi trucks generally are coming before 10:30 in the morning. And what they generally do is they come from the west, they turn right on 3rd Avenue, they come behind the IGA and pull into the loading dock area, and then they exit out Washington Avenue, and for the most part, make a left turn heading back. Very few of those trucks are turning right to continue on to Bayfield. And so that's the truck traffic pattern that he confirmed for me, which I'm very familiar with as I live right there.
Yeah, and I thought in general, like the truck traffic could be handled in some ways, because there's plenty of places for them to turn down in other places to get to that back area. So.
Okay, you mean with the bump outs?
Yeah, with the bump outs, was
Yeah.
one of the concerns, was can they make the turns with the bump outs, I guess?
I think they're adjusting the design so that if the bump outs are there, it would be, I mean, either way, there might be a time when the truck would have to do as they do now and, kind of veer out a little bit to make the turn. I don't think that there's really any way of preventing that completely, but I think that they're aware that even with the bump outs, the truck traffic would need to be making that turn safely.
And I do think it's interesting to think of, we probably would be having a different conversation if that commercial building between Coco's and the IGA was actually being used, like, Mary said in her letter, thinking long-term here, of that being our core downtown. I mean, I realize we have to cut parking somewhere, and right now it seems to make sense on that south side of the road. It doesn't get a lot of use. Well, it does sometimes, like the gentleman who owns the IGA say, people pull in there for convenience with the larger vehicles when they have trailers and stuff. So it's just kind of interesting to think of it, long-term use of that, because that is a big commercial building that right now isn't being used and really doesn't have that much parking.
Sure. Let's see, where are we with this? So we have a motion and a second. Is there any other discussion or questions? The motion on the table is to go with option 1, which is both turn lanes at Washington Avenue, hopefully with losing as little parking as possible. I think the good thing is, that, I don't know if anyone else has seen this, but when two people are both turning left at this intersection here, it really blocks things up quite a bit. And then you get people trying to pass on the right in the middle of the intersection, and it's extremely dangerous. So with the new design, it sounds like it's going to really address the problem pretty well. Hopefully with not a huge amount of lost parking, but can't guarantee that, unfortunately. but I'm pretty confident that they're not going to take up too much parking there, as Scott said. And we will be able to look at these designs eventually and have input on them. This is just giving them direction to proceed. And it is built into the process to have input once the designs are ready to show to the public. So we will have an opportunity to say, no, absolutely not, we cannot do that. This has to be, that's built into the process. So there will be another opportunity for some input. It's just a matter of this choice right now. Okay, any other questions, comments, or discussion on the left turn lanes? Seeing none, all in favor? Aye. Opposed? Do we have a reason for abstention? Do we need a reason for abstention? Charles, I knew.
You don't.
Okay, all right, so 1 abstention. All right, motion carries. Option 1 it is. Okay, thank you everyone. And now we've already done the next tab and moving on to discussion and action on administration goals and objectives for 2021 and review of 2020 goals. Tab 6. Take it away, Scott.
Well, I suppose the best place to start would be just to review 2020. We can do that, and then we can discuss where we're going in 2021.
So, to kick off the review of 2020, I just want to say, holy moly, what a year this has been. I mean, oh my goodness. Unbelievable. You know, we had, I think, some good goals there in place, and there was definitely some progress made, but could there have been another wrench thrown into the to the plan? I don't know. Between COVID and a new business loan program and emergency health orders, and then a new vendor ordinance, and myriad other issues, and 5 elections in 1 year.
Don't forget the elections.
Unbelievable. And not having a public works director for over 6 months, and Tony having to switch jobs and vacate City Hall to fill in those shoes. I mean, our staff, again, not just the ambulance service was pushed to its limits last year, our staff was pushed to its limits last year. And I honestly, for one, am surprised that we didn't have worse repercussions. And everybody has come out, you know, mildly bruised and slightly scarred, but standing and forging ahead. And so for that, I thank you all here at City Hall and beyond at Public Works as well. Jerry coming into the flurry of it at the end there. So with that said, this was an exceptional year, I think. It was my first year as mayor, so I can't say for sure whether it was an exceptional year, but I'm pretty sure it was an exceptional year. And yes, we were tested. So thank you again for all of your efforts and for coaching a new mayor in at the same time, and a new councilman. So having said that, is there anything else we want to talk about? We want to go one by one through our goals here. The Bayfield Street project is progressing. We did negotiate the police association contract. However, there is a little bit further work to do on that with the wages. The emergency service contracts were negotiated with the towns, and that probably was the one thing that I could just put a check on that one, because we actually were able to do it without really too much of a hassle, thank goodness. And that wasn't easy. I mean, there's a lot of prep work that Scott had to do to think all of that through and take into consideration additional costs that were coming in, and even that somewhat simple thing compared to the others was not easy. And then this goal of recruiting and retaining emergency service personnel is one that is desperately needed, but there was no way that we could go beyond survival in that regard this past year. And however, I do really think that this is, well, I think it's one for a priority for this year, but we'll get to this year later. Continuing to nurture leads for the Bayfield Street redevelopment property, aka the Brookdown. who would have thought? All of a sudden, we actually have, multiple interests going on there. So that is good, and hopefully we'll be progressing. Apply for, the utility meter replacement project was another big project happening in the middle of all this last year. And by and large, a large portion of that was completed. And there is more to be done, but COVID, or no COVID, and there was COVID, which did put a little delay, I think, briefly in that project. But a lot did get done, and that was no easy feat as well. And hopefully that's going to make things a little bit easier in the future. Anyone feel free to chime in or jump in on any of this. I mean, obviously we all reviewed this ahead of time, but the West End Park boat landing project, almost done. As done as we could get, given many circumstances. It was a little disheartening, seeing how long things were taking and the dock taking so long to get in at the end. But we're close. Just a very few minor things to button that one up, it sounds like. The sidewalk issue. That, we obviously didn't have the ability to begin to even tackle that last year. But that's going to be something that's going to have to get wound into all of these discussions about budgets and priorities and plans, and at some point, we really need to take a look at that. At least we're looking at sidewalks in the downtown corridor with this project. So step one in the sidewalk project, I would consider in progress. But the rest definitely needs to get looked at. So?
I would say only one additional thing, I don't think I had mentioned that we ended up doing last year. We also contracted out ambulance billing. There was help with that project, obviously, but that was one that we did not anticipate doing last year that we ended up doing. So
you got a bonus project, and that is complete, and the new company is doing the billing for that, or is there still? Yeah.
Yes, they're doing it, and there's a small portion we still have to, as opposed to basically, I don't know, half hour or more, 45 half hour on each run. It's down to between 5 to 10 minutes probably per run in that neighborhood. So
that's huge. I mean, when you think about it, because there were over 500 runs last year, right?
560.
Oh my goodness. Mm-hmm. So think of that, times a half an hour, 280 hours of staff time just to deal with the billing, which will be reduced down to less than 100. So that's huge. Thank you for whoever thought of that and carried it out. Does anyone else have any comments about the 2020 goals? No, everyone's hungry. He wants to go home.
It's over.
Yes, let's write this off. Let's be done with 2020 now, officially, after this meeting. So 2021, heading in. Scott, do you want to walk us through the 2021 goals?
Sure. I would say that we have some big ones here. Obviously, the Bayfield Street project. If we're going to keep this project on track, we have to keep going with that, and that is going to consume more time going forward. So that that is a big one that we need to get to, by the end of this coming year. All the preliminary design should pretty much be complete, and then they'll begin doing a lot of and going into 2022, they'll start doing a lot of their federal review. So we can get it prepared once we get into 2023 for preparing all the bid documents and so forth. So that's
quite a process.
Yes, it is. So that one, there's going to be a lot more of that one as we go forward. The library tuck pointing project, started working on this. The library did a great job in fundraising the money. Now we got to do the project because some of those grants and so forth have requirements on them. So we want to show that, thank you for giving us the money. We're going to do the work. So have begun working with the library to prepare this project. The library director, the library board does not have a lot of experience with the construction process. So I am assisting with that and drafting those documents and reviewing that with the library director and preparing some of those specifications. So it is hopefully our goal to have that packet ready for release in March, receive bids in April, so that project can commence over the summer. That's basically the rough timeline for that. The ambulance staffing issue, which was discussed as a goal that we really did not get a chance to delve into, this was discussed significantly at a recent Personnel and Finance Committee meeting as one that is a critical issue for the city. We have, in as much as we try to educate the public, these are just the average citizens who have gotten a little bit of training as to how to prepare people, get them out of their homes and into the ambulance and to the hospital. That is the basic goal here.
Or even more challenging, out on the trails when you're in the middle of nowhere. Who knows where you're going to have to deal with these.
Right, and so I know Carl can speak more to that of what they go through on a daily basis, but we don't have it takes a lot of commitment and it takes a lot of time, and we don't have a large group of new recruits looking to provide this service. This is not a full-time job. This is not something that people get paid a great deal amount of money for. And the city is not in a position necessarily to provide that without significant tax increases. And people need to understand that. So if you want this guaranteed service, you're going to have to pay for it. But we've got to look at some models and some options because we just do not have the adequate coverage, particularly during the daytime, weekday, when a lot of people are at work. And so there's a few models that we need to look at. We need to go through the pros and cons of these various models and determine what would work best going into the future. And there's a lot of variables here. We have our contracts with the towns to consider. We have what are the costs and the budgetary limits that we are facing, and what is a realistic option for the ambulance service to function by. And so there's going to have to be a lot of discussion with a lot of people on this. And I know the ambulance service is going to be beginning this process. And so if you agree with the Personnel and Finance Committee, this has to be a priority goal as well, just to maintain a service going into the future.
Can I add a couple comments?
Please, go ahead, Carl.
We are by regulation required to have a fully staffed ambulance 24/7. A fully staffed BLS, or basic life support, ambulance requires 2 licensed EMTs on at all times. We fail to do that 24% of the time. So, and 8% of the time last year, we had nobody on.
And when you say nobody on, you mean nobody on call?
There was nobody on call. So, if you look at our runs, now I primarily take daytime because I'm the only one that's retired. Everybody else has a job. I did 20% of the on-call hours that were done last year. I did 42% of the runs, and that's daytime. So the critical period of time is between 7 o'clock in the morning and 5 o'clock at night.
That's eye-opening. Thank you for sharing that. Dave?
Ideally, you're looking for retired folks.
Yeah, actually, a lot of the other services have gone with a, I don't want to call it part-time, but with somebody that's on the paid on-call during the daytime. That's their principal job during the daytime. You're not going to do that for the $2 an hour that you're currently paying for somebody to be on call. If you looked at the $15 that everybody likes to talk about, if you look at the curve of salaries for licensed EMTs in the state of Wisconsin, $15 is the lowest quartile. So that would be the lowest paid EMT in the state of Wisconsin. So typically you're looking at $18 an hour plus some benefits. So it's not cheap by any stretch of the imagination. Now last year we had call in Ashland 9 times to cover calls for us. And that could be because we're already on a call and there's a second call. We're getting more double calls than we ever did before. Just in January, I think 3 times we had 2 ambulances going in different directions at the same time. So, things are heating up a little bit here. Interestingly enough, we had to call in Ashland and cover our calls 9 times. We covered other people's calls 54 times. So when South Shore ambulance broke down, we ended up going to South Shore. We've been to Red Cliff and to Bayfield, backing them up as well. And in fact, we backed up Ashland twice. I think we backed up Ashland on calls. So, there's plenty of work between the services, but you can't always depend on that.
All right, thank you.
When Ashland comes here, do we pay for that?
Ashland, their cost gets added to our bill, and we'll rebill the insurance. If we need, again, we're basic life support. If we need advanced life support, then we'll call Ashland for an intercept. That's where you see the SUV that goes racing through town. Those are paramedics, and they need to start IVs and do skills that we're not trained to do.
So we definitely need to give this some real careful consideration. Karen?
Personnel has a meeting scheduled with Dan, who is putting together some options for us. I think it's the 16th or 17th of March. I didn't have it in my book, but that week of March to begin to look at and not lose track of this, because it's not going away. It's getting, more and more difficult, and we have to do something. So that's why we had a lengthy meeting about it, and then I said, we've got to have the next meeting, and we've got to look at some concrete ideas, even though we know that this is going to be expensive. I mean, we don't want to think about the alternative. So.
Sure. Well, and this is one of those things where I think we're legally obligated to provide a service, and so we need to figure out a way to do it.
If we say we have an ambulance service, we have to meet those criteria, those regulations.
And I think as a city, we are just required to
Every
do that.
municipality in the state is required to provide service. Now, if you contract it out, as the townships do to us, they're covered. But then the burden is on us to be sure that we're providing that service.
Right. And that does provide us cost sharing on the capital items and that sort of thing. So all really good things that we're going to have to delve into more.
So we're trying not to lose track of it. I mean, we're on it.
Good, thank you. Dave, did you have something?
Yeah, just one more quick question. Are we routinely taking care of Red Cliff? I heard Bayfield doesn't do that anymore.
Bayfield doesn't do it because they, if we go to Red Cliff, we have to have another crew standing by in Washburn. So when we go to Red Cliff to back them up, we start calling, you don't hear it, but we're calling and getting 2 other EMTs to be standing by it to handle a call in Washburn. And Bayfield is in a critical situation. I think at one point this summer they were down to 4 EMTs.
And their population explodes. And they're dealing with the residents being less than 400 or whatever.
They've got a couple of EMTs that it's just a summer residence and they're not there year round. So, they may cover some calls, but then if they have to leave their area of responsibility, then they're not covered, and then they're in violation of the state statutes.
I would ask, I'm very happy that the mayor is on the league board, and I would ask the mayor to assist in advocating. I really believe that this is one of those rural versus urban issues. I lived in the urban part of the state for a very long time, and these are things that people in the urban areas never think about. And so that is it's very different. It's a very important issue for up here.
To be honest, it's not unique to Washburn or this area.
So much more to be discussed on this one. I think that's probably good for tonight. So let's continue on the 2021. That one, I just put a big star by it because obviously that one needs to have a lot of priority.
We have the broke down. Of course, everyone is pretty familiar with that. We have not really started those negotiations. I do expect that to begin soon when Badger returns to the area. That's not something that we can drop at this point. We have to keep going with that. We want to get that building revitalized and back on the tax roll. That was the whole goal. That is part of the long-range strategy to help improve our situation. We have some unfinished things that we need to focus on and work on. Finish off the meter project. We're doing a little project at the marina right now as well. We got to finish the police contract off. So there are some other projects there. We're going to have to go through redistricting this summer. I've never done that myself. I know some of that's got delayed too with the census stuff. So there's going to be a few other things that we're just going to have to do. We can't delay that. Comprehensive plan process is starting. I'm going to try to step back a little on that one. Let everyone else go forward with that. Sidewalks. I know that it's an issue. I've talked about sidewalks for probably 10 years. We have some, I think, fundamental policy issues that would need to be decided. I think we have to get through some steps here on the Bayfield Street project to kind of set the tone as to what we're going to be doing and where we're going to be at. How is it going to be done? There are things to think about, but as far as what we're actually going to be able to accomplish, I don't feel confident that sidewalks is going to be again high on, or we're going to be able to get very far on sidewalks at this time. But at some point, sidewalks will have its day in the sun. It's an issue that's not going to go away. So those are kind of the big picture projects that I see out there. And keep in mind, that's not everything. There are things that are going to come up. They always do. They always will. And keep in mind that at this point, we are still down one position here. We've not filled Kay Bratley's spot. That is in the budget halftime. We'll be looking at that. I'll be looking at the options. Is there a way that we can make that full time again going into the next year? I'd really like to do that, but the financial situation, when I look at it again, I might get another dose of reality, but we'll see. But it has caused us here at City Hall to redo things again. So right now, Tony is basically doing the utility billing. I think there's only been a couple months since Tony has been here that he's actually been able to do the job he was hired to do. If he likes variety, that's great. But we're not doing all the stuff that we're able to do. I myself am learning new things. Tammy is at her capacity of the amount of work that she can take on. The zoning code that we have is complex, to say the least. That requires a lot more work than it ever used to. Everything has to be documented. A lot of these decisions are not easy, and you have to go through the code, and there's always little nuances and variations here. And the public likes to use us as their planner for what they should build. And so we have to try to, give them the information and that they need to make their decisions. So it's complicated. So my goal for the City Hall is we need to also make sure that we are able to function going into the future here, and no one function should be only known by one person. If something happens, we will be in a world of hurt. So we've been trying to cross-train so that every function has at least two people who know what's going on and how that works. And we have a little ways to go yet. I mean, I myself am doing payroll. I'll be doing payroll again starting tomorrow. That's not something that I've normally done. And that kind of stuff that somebody's got to learn takes away from my time that I used to do everything else. And so I ask that everyone understands if I'm not getting back to you right away or something's not going to get done, that's why. Because there's a time and a process for everything.
You know, not that it's necessarily always a bad thing, but with the whole onset of COVID, I think there's a lot of people that have a lot more time on their hands, and so they call us with a lot more questions and issues. And so that has, the volume of contacts that we've had seems to have gone up significantly this past year. And so we're also trying to balance the work of 4 now with 3. Hopefully we can even that back out again. So we're still in recovery. We haven't recovered from last year, just getting caught up. I still have requests on my desk that are nearly a year old that I have not been able to touch. So that's kind of where we're at. So I don't want to set expectations too high. We're just trying to recover, trying to keep going with some of these major projects that obviously are very important. And that's really where I'm at.
Well, thank you for putting this together. I think it's a good list, and I think something that's coming to light for me is, you know, there's basic services that the city provides and is legally obligated to provide, and then there's all of these extra projects. And not only are we down-staffed to provide those basic services, and we have some of these extra projects that are, you know, critical, but we're missing that hole in the basic service of the ambulance. That is, you know, we're a boat with a lot of holes in it that we need to try to plug. And so I think I see that this is a discussion and action item, and you're looking for some priority on this, or are you looking for eventual action?
Typically, the council would approve the list of goals, and it's varied over the years. Sometimes the council can assign priority. Other times they just, you know, this is the general list and go forth as you see best. So that's up to you to discuss, or if you think there's something else or something that should be changed, that's up to you to provide that to comment and direction. When this is really where I told you where you're at, but the council needs to kind of tell me where you want to go. What is this an accurate reflection of what you see as the priority and what I think is reasonable to work on and try to accomplish? So,
Karen?
Well, I would like to make a motion that these goals be approved without priority, because I think, you know, who knows on a day-to-day basis, I mean, which one is going to bubble up as, you know, the most important, and we really have to provide some attention to it. So, having said that as background, I would move approval of the goals for 2021 as presented.
I'll second
End of
that.
sentence.
So a motion by Karen and a second by Tom to approve the list of goals, at this time without priority. And I think, I guess, yeah, we can do discussion then. So I think somewhere it says that we can always add to this, change it, edit it, set a priority at a later date. So does anyone have any comments or suggestions or discussion items on that motion?
I'll just say that I think item number 1 is probably going to take up most of all of the city staff time, including public works. So I would agree. I think we should let Scott decide as things, you know, kind of come and go, what priority should be. So I don't think we should tie his hands in any way.
Okay. Any other comments? Seeing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. again, thank you for your work in 2020 and helping us look forward to 2021. May it be an easier year. Okay, next item is going into closed session to negotiate and confer with legal counsel on the request for relief on the existing agreement with Pearl Beach Construction related to previously purchased Lot 47 at the southwest corner of the intersection of Harborview Drive and Central Avenue, and personnel matters for evaluation of the city administrator.
Madam Mayor, I would move that we go into closed session per Wisconsin State Statutes 19.85, bracket 1, end bracket, small bracket E, and end bracket E, end bracket G, end bracket, to consider amending the approved agreement with Pearl Beach Construction, and also bracket C, end bracket, for personnel matters.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mary. All in favor?
Roll call vote.
Oh, roll call vote.
Dave Anderson? Yes. Carl Broberg?
Yes.
Jen Mazias?
Yes.
Mary McGrath?
Yes.
Tom Ninus?
Yes.
Karen Novacek?
Yes.
Laura Tulowitzki?
Yes.
All in favor, closed session at 7:50.